It is 1976, and a Formula One car has just rolled out of the Tyrrell factory with 4 front wheels. Not 2, 4. The mechanics who pushed it out of the garage that morning had built it with their own hands. They knew exactly what it was, and even they stopped and stared. Derek Gardner, Tyrrell's chief designer, had spent 18 months working on this car in total secrecy, hiding the drawings, locking the workshop, telling nobody outside the team what he was building. When the covers came off, the reaction from the rest of Formula One was immediate and unanimous. This was either the most creative idea the sport had ever seen, or the most embarrassing. Nobody was neutral, nobody could afford to be. The car was the Tyrrell P34. It had 6 wheels. It won a Grand Prix, and then it disappeared. Not because it was banned, not because it was illegal, but because one company decided to stop making a tyre. That is the whole story. Except it isn't, because the real story is what the P34 proved about the limits of conventional thinking, and what happened when one designer decided those limits were not actually limits at all. To understand why Gardner built 6 wheels, you have to understand the problem he was trying to solve. In 1976, every Formula One car had the same front-end architecture: 2 large wheels, 2 large tyres, a front wing that generated downforce, and a nose that caused aerodynamic drag. The tyres were the problem. Large front tyres create frontal area creates drag. Drag costs speed. Every team accepted this as a fixed condition of racing car design. Gardner did not accept it. His idea was simple in concept and almost impossibly difficult in execution. Replace the 2 large front tyres with 4 small ones, 4 10-inch diameter tyres arranged in 2 pairs, each pair on a single axle, staggered front to rear. The frontal area would drop dramatically. The aerodynamic drag from the front wheels, which on a conventional car was substantial, would be almost eliminated. The car would be faster in a straight line without changing the engine or the rear aerodynamics at all. There was a second benefit that Gardner had identified, and it was less obvious but equally important: 4 contact patches instead of 2. In a fast corner, the load on the front tires of a Formula One car is enormous. The downforce and the cornering force combine to load each tire to its limit. With 4 tires sharing that load instead of 2, each individual tire is working less hard. It runs cooler, it lasts longer, it operates further from its performance limit, which means it has more grip available precisely when the driver needs it most. Jody Scheckter, who drove the P34 in 1976 alongside Patrick Depailler, described the front-end grip as unlike anything he had experienced in a conventional car. In slow corners, where mechanical grip from the tires matters more than aerodynamic downforce, the P34 felt planted in a way that gave him confidence he could push earlier, harder, and later than in any car he had previously driven. The problem was everything else. The steering geometry was a problem that Gardner's team spent months solving. 4 wheels that steer together must turn at slightly different angles to avoid scrubbing. The outer pair follows a larger radius than the inner pair through any given corner. On a conventional 2-wheel car, this is managed by the Ackermann geometry built into the steering linkage. With 4 wheels arranged in 2 pairs, the Ackermann calculation becomes 4 times more complex. Getting it wrong means tire scrub, which means heat, which means degradation, which means the grip advantage Gardner had designed for disappears before the end of a race. The braking system presented a separate engineering challenge entirely. With 4 front wheels, the brake bias calculation, how much braking force goes to the front and how much to the rear, involves 6 points of contact rather than 4. The hydraulic system that managed this had to be designed from scratch, because no existing Formula One brake system had been built to handle this configuration. Goodyear made the 10-inch front tires. This was not a trivial commitment. An entirely new tyre size required new molds, new compounds, new testing, and a separate development program running alongside everything else Goodyear was doing for the rest of the Formula One grid. Goodyear agreed because Tyrrell were a serious team and the concept was credible, but Goodyear's commitment to developing the small front tyres was contingent on the P34 remaining a competitive project. The moment the car stopped being competitive, the development program would stop. This is the detail that ended the P34. Not a ban, not a rule change, a tyre. The P34 made its race debut at the Spanish Grand Prix in May 1976. The paddock reaction was everything Gardner had expected and nothing he could fully prepare for. Drivers from other teams gathered around it in the garage. Engineers photographed it. Team principals walked past slowly, saying nothing, looking carefully. Niki Lauda, who was leading the championship that season in a Ferrari and who had not survived a near-fatal accident yet, reportedly walked around it 3 times without speaking. Scheckter qualified 4th. Depierre qualified 7th. For a car making its race debut with a configuration that had never been tried at this level of competition, these were results that silenced at least some of the skeptics. The defining moment came at the Swedish Grand Prix at Anderstorp. On June 13, 1976, Jody Scheckter led from pole position and won. Patrick Depailler finished second. It was a Tyrrell 1-2 in a 6-wheeled car, at a circuit that suited the P34's low-drag straight-line speed, against a full field that included the championship-leading Ferrari of Niki Lauda. Scheckter said afterward that the car felt like it was on a different surface from everyone else through the fast sections. The drag reduction was real. The straight-line speed advantage was measurable. For one afternoon in Sweden, the 6-wheeled car was the fastest Formula One car in the world. The rest of 1976 was competitive but not dominant. The P34 scored points regularly. Scheckter finished 3rd in the Drivers' Championship. Tyrrell finished 3rd in the Constructors' Championship. By the standards of a team without the resources of Ferrari or McLaren, this was a strong result. By the standards of what the Swedish Grand Prix had suggested might be possible, it was a disappointment. The problem was development. Goodyear's small front tyre was not improving at the same rate as the conventional tyres they were developing for the rest of the grid. A tyre that stays the same while everything around it improves is, in relative terms, getting worse. By mid-season, the grip advantage Gardner had designed around was narrowing. By the end of the season, it had largely disappeared. For 1977, Tyrrell persisted with the P34. The car was updated. New bodywork, revised aerodynamics, detail improvements throughout. But Goodyear's commitment to the small tyre development program was visibly diminishing. The compound was not being updated with the same frequency as the conventional tyres. The performance gap that had been closing throughout 1976 continued to close through 1977 until it became, in the second half of the season, an outright deficit. Ronnie Peterson joined the team for 1977, replacing Scheckter. Peterson was one of the fastest drivers in Formula One, a man who could extract performance from almost any car. Even he could not overcome the tyre deficit. The P34 that had won in Sweden in 1976 finished the 1977 season without a victory. At the end of the year, Tyrrell abandoned the 6-wheel concept entirely. Goodyear officially ended the small tyre development program at the end of 1977. Without a tyre supplier willing to develop the critical component the car's concept depended on, the P34 had no future. Not because it had been beaten on the circuit, not because the FIA had found a regulation it violated, because a tyre company had made a commercial decision. Ken Tyrrell, who had built the team from nothing and who had approved Gardner's project when everyone else thought it was impossible, said afterward that the P34 had been killed not by a competitor but by a supplier. It was, in his assessment, the most frustrating conclusion to a project he had ever been involved with. Other teams had been watching. Williams had studied the six-wheel concept and concluded it was promising. Wolff had considered it. March had drawn preliminary designs. The FIA, observing the interest from multiple teams, decided not to wait for the concept to proliferate, and in 1983 introduced regulations requiring Formula One cars to have exactly 4 wheels. The rule was not written because the P34 had been dangerous or unfair. It was written because the concept had been credible enough that the sport's governing body preferred to close the question before it became complicated. It is worth sitting with that. The FIA banned 6 wheels not because they were a problem, but because they might have been a solution. The Tyrrell P34 won 1 race. It finished on the podium 7 times. It competed for 2 full seasons against the best cars and drivers in the world. And it was retired not because it had failed, but because a single external supplier had decided to stop supporting the one component the concept required. Derek Gardner left Formula One shortly after the P34 program ended. He never designed another racing car. The concept he had spent 18 months developing in secret, that had produced one of the most visually distinctive machines the sport has ever seen, was rendered obsolete by a tyre catalogue decision. In the South African National Motor Museum at Franschhoek, a Tyrrell P34 sits on display. The 6 wheels are still attached. The steering geometry is still exactly as Gardner designed it. The small front tyres are still fitted, even though the company that made them stopped developing them 47 years ago. It looks wrong. It looks like a mistake. It looks like something that should not exist. It won a Grand Prix. If you found this useful, subscribe. There are more stories like this one in the archive, and more coming. Leave a comment below. Which car should we examine next? The McLaren MP4 that won 15 of 16 races in 1988, or the Ferrari F2004 that Schumacher drove to the championship before the summer break?